So imagine my shock when I was applying for colleges that my parents revealed to me that we'd been frugal this entire time because now I don't have to take any student loans to attend university. Is really the purpose of money to be rich? What if instead it gives you the freedom to build the family that you've always wanted?
Shang Saavedra is the founder and CEO of Save My Sense, a personal finance platform that empowers people to live debt-free and with purpose. Named one of Time Next Advisor's 25 most influential new voices of money, she reached financial independence by 31 and now teaches others how to do the same, proving that a joyful, work-optional life is possible.
So why is it that there are some Christians that are broke and poor, and then there are other Christians that thrive? Where would you say the leading root of the problem is?
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Shang. So
Hi,
great
Lynn.
to see you in person.
I know, it's incredible how far you've traveled to be here.
It's really interesting because we actually also have met each other through the Asian Hustle Network, right? And you reached out to me, but I actually already recognized you on Instagram. You're an influencer. You specialize in that finance area, and I've seen you around. And when we had the opportunity to have this podcast, I'm like, hang on, you happen to be in Orange County?
I know. I was like, wait, yeah, I live right here.
So welcome to the show. And I guess before we get started and really understanding your journey through faith and business and how you got into the world of finance, let's show the audience your item for show and tell.
Awesome. So the book I brought is Wealth is a Mindset. Shang Saavedra, that's me. And it's all about how changing your mindset and changing your mental health is actually the way to go to change the way that your money story is going to end up being. Yeah, here you go.
So tell me, what inspired you to write this book now? I guess you've been, talking about this topic for a while.
Yeah.
You decide to launch this book.
Well, funny enough, I never thought that I would write a book. I mean, I know a lot of people self-publish these days, and that's fantastic. I decided it was not for me. I'm not part of the media industry in any meaningful way. So I'm like, just not going to do a book. And then randomly one day, an acquaintance of mine from college said, she's starting a publishing company focused on Asian American Pacific Islander voices. And she asked, have you ever thought about writing a book? I said, yeah, I just never spoke it out loud, but sure, if you want me to. So we worked together on creating the concept of the book. And 2 years later, Wealth is a Mindset was born.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to go through the chapters that you covered in the book. But before we go on about the book, I guess I would love to hear a little bit about your own journey. I mean, I did read through a little bit on the book, so I got to see it. But yeah, let's share with the audience, I guess, what was your upbringing like, and even touch on a little bit about, were you, born in a Christian family, or was it something that you discovered later as well?
Yeah. So I was born, same as my parents, in People's Republic of China. None of us were Christian at the time. My parents found an opportunity to leave around the time when I was 3 years old. And then so we moved to Europe initially. We first landed actually in Switzerland. And knowing nobody in the community, my parents befriended a Taiwanese couple just in the same neighborhood, and they brought us to church because they're like, they're going to meet more Chinese speaking people there. And at the same time, all three of us converted to Christianity. So I was 4 at that time. And I remember distinctly, my mom said, she was talking to me on a train, and she said, this is what it means to accept Jesus into your heart. Do you think you could do that? I said, yes. And that's how I converted, and I've been Christian ever since.
Wow.
Yeah. And my parents and I would say we lived the frugal immigrant life. There wasn't a lot of money throughout, and my dad moved us several times for his job. My mom was a stay-at-home mom because she couldn't, find the time to find work. When I was 10 years old, we moved to the United States, and where we've been ever since. At that time, my mom learned enough English that she could also go to work. But throughout my young life, my understanding was we don't have a lot of money. We have to be very frugal. We did everything ourselves. There was no room for really nice things. We rarely ate out, rarely traveled. So imagine my shock when I was applying for colleges that my parents revealed to me that we'd been frugal this entire time because now I don't have to take any student loans to attend university because they've been taking a lot of the savings over the years and investing it. And that's when they first introduced the idea that not only is it responsible to have a good grasp on your personal finances, but investing allows for it to grow. And so throughout my 20s, I would say I was quite greedy and I wanted to do really well financially. I wanted to get rich. And I knew that investing was a way to go about it. So I started out on a path of let's get rich, let's make a lot of money. And then in my mid-20s, when I met my now husband, he was actually the one that challenged the whole notion and said, is really the purpose of money to be rich? What if instead it gives you the freedom to build the family that you've always wanted as a Christian? That was not what I was thinking, but I knew that biblically he was correct. And so by the time we got married, we decided, and we were living in New York City at this time, so it's not cheap. We would live off the lower of our two incomes, whichever that may be, and save and invest the other income to create essentially the ability for us to have children. And we had, trouble getting pregnant for many years, but for the time being, the money grew and grew. And to my surprise, according to my calculations, and also other people, gave some advice as well. By the time I was 31 years old, we had saved enough that we never needed to worry about our retirement. And I didn't know that that was extraordinary. I just had no idea that, all the sacrifices we made just led to this extraordinary outcome. But the path towards it required a lot of mental change, working on my mindset, my mental health. And that's what inspired me to launch Save My Sense as a way to educate others on the importance of mental health throughout this journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And there's so many areas that I want to kind of go deeper in. So at the time, I know what it's like to migrate from an Asian country, a developing country, go over to Australia. My parents were also just working so hard trying to save money. But I don't remember them being too frugal. They were always, I guess, they didn't save, but they definitely, they worked hard, but then I didn't feel like we had any lack,
That's right.
So were you resentful with your parents, considering they didn't tell you that they were saving, right? They just made you live frugally.
Yeah.
How did that impact your, perspective on life or how you felt about them?
I'm grateful because, I went to Harvard. It's exceedingly expensive. And
at the time when you were having to live in a family that was frugal and you haven't figured out that they were saving yet.
I had everything that I needed. And because I was already Christian at that time and we'd gone through, other hardships, I learned how incredibly important it was to always be grateful. And we traveled a little bit. I traveled back to China. This is before China really took off. So the villages that we were originally from, I would still see a lot of poverty, lack of infrastructure, no modern stores whatsoever. I was like, wow, this is where I came from. And knowing that my parents took me out of that and moved me to the US already made me realize, wow, I have so much more than where I could have been. Yeah. So that really brought a lot of perspective. And yes, my parents were always generous in terms of we always had a safe roof. We lived in a good school district, so education was really high quality in the public school that I went to. They made sure that I was always transported to all of my extracurricular activities. Yeah. And so in those everyday things were always taken care of. It was just, okay, I didn't travel as much as my friends, or I didn't wear as nice clothing as my fellow peers. Thankfully, we didn't have that much social media back then. Yeah. So I've also felt like I didn't have as much pressure as teenagers would today, seeing lifestyles of people who have a lot of money.
Yeah. So with me, I didn't discover Christianity till maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Whereas yourself, you were a Christian, from a very young age. Was there some sort of tension between, wanting more money and being rich and knowing that, you know, you're a Christian and you should be more grateful? Like, was there some sort of tension that you had to navigate?
Yeah. I mean, faith is in and of itself something that you have to ask God for all the time as well. And I would say in my early 20s, when I was so focused on my career, I will also admit I perhaps did not commit as much as I would have liked to my life of faith. So concurrently with the time that I was so focused on making a lot of money, I also wasn't taking my scripture seriously. I wasn't going to church as frequently. I didn't even care to date, you know, somebody who might even be Christian. I also dated secular people. And I think that definitely had its own, you know, challenges. And I think that probably also fed into low self-esteem at the time, and also probably more anxiety than I should have experienced. I was a very anxious person. The way that eventually I came to understand God's relationship with money and how he's teaching that to us. And this is another brilliant, you know, phrase from my husband. I credit him with a lot more biblical wisdom than me. He goes, we're actually God's portfolio managers. And I was like, can you explain that to me a little bit? He said, whatever income, whatever resources, he's granted it to us, and he wants us to manage this for his purposes. And that actually took a lot of pressure off of me, because I was like, I no longer feel the pressure to be like, oh, it is up to me to make as much money or to invest the best way. It's okay. God granted me whatever I have, and I'm going to do my best. And that it's okay to want to invest well. That actually made me feel better, because I was like, am I investing for the wrong reason? No, if you're investing well and the goal is to serve God, that's really what he meant by that.
Yeah. That's amazing. And, you know, I too was a single mom, broke. At the time, I wasn't a Christian, but I discovered something around the law of prosperity, which is all about like, give and you shall get. And kind of, you know, I guess, how are you portraying to the universe that you are not living in lack? And I remember that time it was like such a challenging thought, because I was broke and I had to do something brave, which was, so I was on government support. At the time I was a single mum, and I said, okay, if I am on child support, it means that I'm telling the universe at the time that I need help, that I'm poor, that I need help. And so then I decided to actually cancel it and call it up before I needed. I needed the money, but I was like, no, I want to act like as if I already got more money, and if a richer person wouldn't need this. And so I trusted the universe at the time. You know, I told you I wasn't a Christian. Yeah. And I remember doing such a brave thing to do that. And then it kind of, I mean, from then on, I never needed government support anymore, and I started making money. And because when I read your book, it reminded me of this whole lack mentality and abundant mentality. And I had to consciously switch that mindset, challenge myself. So yeah, I want you to share a little bit about the whole lack mentality, how we can kind of shift that.
Yeah. A lot of people come up to me and they say, oh, I have scarcity mindset because I'm frugal. And I would actually argue that that's a very, it's a misinterpretation of the phrase scarcity mindset. To me, the difference between somebody who's scarce versus somebody who's abundant is that the abundant person embraces risk and accepts that risk is a part of life, whereas the scarce person is scared and runs away from risk. So I can actually see that in your life. The moment that you said, you know, I'm going to cancel that government support, you embraced one of the most riskiest moves you could have ever done in your life. And you said, I'm going to try it out. And you don't even know if it's going to work out at that point, but you did. Yeah. I think I see that too in my parents, in that they embraced the risk of leaving everything they knew behind, becoming immigrants. As you understand that, they never made themselves or me feel ashamed that we were immigrants. They said we wanted to take the risk to build a better life. And so that was how they demonstrated abundance to me. And yes, we were frugal. And the reason why I argue in my book why a lot of immigrants also feel scarce is that, yes, we all share a similar background of frugality from our parents. Now, how did your parents talk about risk to you? Many immigrant parents don't want their children to take the same amount of risk and suffering as they did. And so many immigrant parents, as they're bringing up these children in the new countries, would be like, hey, you become a doctor, engineer, lawyer, earn the good money. Don't, struggle like we did. Don't, open up a convenience shop or whatever like we did. And you're going to make a lot of money. But what they're also communicating to their children at the same time is don't take the big risks in life. We already did it. You shouldn't have to. And so that's where people get the conflation of, okay, scarcity means frugal. I'm like, no, the frugality came from your background. The scarcity is how you think about risk. And in my 20s, I did fall into scarcity because when I was chasing wealth, I saw everybody around me as competition. I was a really bad friend to be around because when we played games, on games night, I was a bad loser. I was very competitive. And also when my friends wanted to hang out with me, I would actually judge them by, do I think they can help me with my career or not? I was very transactional, very much like a New York City kind of mindset. And at that time, I just couldn't get it through to my head that there's always more to go around. I just felt like resources and time and opportunities were limited, and I was competing for the same thing as my friends, and that's scarcity. And I had to work through that.
I think that's exactly what I felt when I became a Christian, is that I could feel like I give freely without expecting anything. Whereas before discovering the faith, it was more of a selfish reason. It was like, yes, I'll follow these rules and lives so that I will get more for me. And once you realize, achieving more success, more money didn't really fulfill you, was when I discovered, I stumbled across a video on YouTube and I found myself going to church, and then I was like, oh my God.
Social media. Such a great way to spread the message.
So it was really random. And now I'm always so grateful that I've discovered faith that allows me to do everything that I was doing, but with a different kind of intention.
Exactly. It doesn't necessarily change the ongoing career that you might have, but it changes the way that you think about the meaning and the purpose behind everything.
And I like that you embrace the word frugal. And I realized, even though I don't like that connotation, I'm like, actually, I am frugal in a sense. I would save. I don't need brands. I want the product for its practicality. But there are certain things that I treasure, like traveling, and I would splurge on those values. So when it comes to frugality, like for you, what does it mean for you, and how do you spent back then and was able to save?
Right. And this is where I use two words. I said you can either be frugal or cheap.
Aha.
Yeah.
I thought frugal was a bad word. Cheap sounds really nasty.
Because, in at least in American culture, cheap is seen as tacky. So the difference is, when you're frugal, you're intentional with your money. So like you said, there's some places where you don't value spending the money and some places where you do, and you spend in alignment with your values. And that's totally okay. One of your values being, I'm not going to spend more than I make. I'm going to try to save money. Cheap is the mentality of whatever I do, I'm going to get it at the lowest cost, even if it hurts somebody else or if it's low quality. And I can be sometimes cheap. When it comes to my children's clothing, I'm actually quite cheap because I'm like, they're going to destroy it within a few months anyway.
That's still, to me, intentionally and frugal because you know that it doesn't, it's not smart to be buying something that they're going to outgrow it.
But sometimes I do buy children's stuff from Walmart. But then when it comes to things that I want to last, for example, I really care about my handbags. So I actually buy from Italy, Italian manufactured, non-premium branded handbags that are still made of good leather. They don't cost, thousands of dollars, but I know that they're going to last many years. And that's where I'm frugal because I'm buying something that I value, but at the same time, I'm doing it for a reasonable cost.
So why is it that there are some Christians that are broke and poor, and then there are other Christians that thrive? Where would you say, the leading root of the problem is?
Yeah. And I don't think it's necessarily your faith. I actually would challenge that everybody who feels that they are poor to actually look back at your childhood. The way that you were brought up around money. We've already been sharing a little bit about how, you and I grew up. the way that your parents or guardians even spoke about money to you can have a lasting impact well into your adulthood, even if you don't realize it. I do personal finance coaching, and a lot of the people that I work with, they're like, oh, I don't understand why I keep getting into credit card debt or why I have so many impulse purchasing. And I ask them, how did you grow up around money? In my book, I found basically 3 patterns that basically replicate across the vast majority of people who we consider to have bad money behaviors. Doesn't mean that you're a bad person. You just have bad money behaviors. The first one is what I call feast and famine. This is the one where your parents live paycheck to paycheck, either because there just wasn't enough money or they're very bad at managing their money. So impulsive spending, you see spending when they have money, you see credit card debt when they don't have money, and you never saw an example of planning ahead. And so that's a hard example to grow up under, because you often mimic what your parents do. The second root cause is what I call adverse events, which is when growing up, money and resources were used as a tool to control you, sometimes abuse you. And so this is where children growing up, they might have heard their parents say, oh, I'm not going to buy you anything unless you do this, you behave like this, or you look like this, but in a very mean way, not like a motivational, they actually withhold essentials from the children. And so that is a very warped sense of self, because growing up, you think, I need to be something, these children are then growing up, they don't get the word of the God in that God says you have inherent value and that you are to be loved no matter who you are. They're being told you can only deserve love if you are something. And so these children growing up have what I call identity seeking money behaviors, and that they'll spend their money or they'll spend their time and resources chasing accolades, external validation. On the positive side, some of these people are doing very well in their careers because that's where they get their affirmation from. But also you can see people overspend on aesthetic treatments, clothing, and sometimes in the worst scenario.
It's a very dangerous mentality because you see them making a lot of money, but there's no savings. They're spending more than they make.
Substance abuse is the worst one, where they just cannot find meaning within themselves, and so they go and abuse an item. So that's the second mindset. The third and last mindset, we actually already talked about the scarce immigrant, the one where you grow up, your parents tell you to avoid risk. So as an adult, you avoid risk in your career and you avoid risk in investing. And I would say most people have 1, 2, or maybe 3 of these all in their childhood.
And so what's the first step? Is it asking yourself, and looking back at the past, like how do we, if we're aware now, that could be the potential reasons, like what's the first step that we can take?
I would say changing the way that you talk to yourself. Because oftentimes when I stop at describing these mindsets, I just went on a book tour. I'll have people come up to me in the audience like, oh my gosh, I'm that feast and famine. Or I grew up adverse events. What do I do now? I'm like, first of all, don't beat yourself up. Like, don't feel regret over the difficulties you've had when you were a child. And even though I don't say that this is blatantly Christian, I say you are enough. Who you were before and who you are today, and who you are going to be in the future, you're enough and you're going to love yourself. And the basis being from Christianity, meaning that you deserve love no matter where you are. We're going to forgive ourselves first. And then from that place of self-love and self-forgiveness, then I think that opens up their hearts to say, okay, then how do I change? And then there's obviously mechanisms for how to change after that.
Interestingly, one of the next step that I did and this is something I can resonate with because I went through it. I was broke, remember? And at the time I started my business and I wasn't making that much. And one of the challenging thing is, other than the cancelling the government support, I also was challenged to give a portion of what you've got. And I remember going, I haven't got that much to give. This now reminds me of tithing, when you're in church and the pastor's explaining to you the importance of it and how you can never outgive God and you have to trust that when you give more, more comes back. And, before being a Christian, I heard all of this stuff. And then I did it out of faith. I was like, look, whatever I'm doing, it's not working. So I'm going to try this. And I remember giving away a portion of what I had. And surprisingly, money came from somewhere. And it started. So then from then, I just keep repeating that. Whenever you're giving away more than you think you have, you always feel scared.
Yes.
But somehow it creates this new momentum of more coming back to you. Can you share kind of that phenomenon and how it works like that in terms of being able to be brave enough to give away what you have?
My husband, when we were merging our finances upon marriage, he's like, I did the calculations. You're not giving enough. And I was like, oh, this is the first time somebody called me out on that, because obviously before we got married, nobody had any visibility into my money and how much I tithed. And yes, I was probably tithing closer to about 4 to 5% instead of 10%. He's like, you're not tithing enough, Shang. Like, why are you withholding this from God? It was never yours to begin with. Very challenging, and kicking and screaming. I'm like, fine, I will tithe the full 10%, but that's a lot less money for me. So similar to you, I was not happy about it at first. I didn't see the reasons. And yes, the pastors talk about the importance of tithing. I just didn't believe it. And I would say what changed my mind was, well, finally I learned to live without the tithe money. And then I also realized, as my income started building over time, I reached a point where spending more didn't necessarily make me happier. I do agree that if you are in poverty and you're living paycheck to paycheck, yes, having more money helps your happiness a lot. It will give you better housing, better healthcare, everything. But once you have everything that you need, then the happiness, the joy from spending on something nice is temporary.
Yeah. They do say there's some sort of amount of number, maybe $100 and something thousand, where after that, it doesn't really make any difference
exactly anymore. And we fall into the psychological phenomenon called hedonic adaptation, in that, let's say the first time I flew business class, wow, my joy went from here to here. But then the second time you fly business class, it doesn't go up as
this
high.
Is feeling normal now.
Yeah. And so I realized if I keep doing that, I'm just going to be as unhappy as I started with. But in giving and enabling other people who need a lot more of this money than I do to thrive and have some of their issues solved, I was like, oh, that is the eternal joy of giving.
Yeah. And the other thing that I learned from Pastor Vallard from Hungry Generation, which is actually the pastor that converted me. I found him on YouTube and got converted.
Yeah.
He said sometimes the blessing that you receive might be, you might receive it for your husband, or it might come in different forms. Like you might give away money, but all of a sudden you're gifted with, I don't know, a new relationship or something else that is not what when you give 100, you think you're going to receive another 100 or 200. It's kind of a different form. Do you believe in that kind of?
Yeah, I don't think it's a necessarily like one-to-one relationship, but I will say that over time, perhaps also because I'm challenging myself to live on, without the tithe, I saw a lot more value in developing my community, my relationships, going to church more faithfully, and then eventually having my family, being blessed with my children, which we did have to go through IVF treatments for. And yes, over time, not immediately, but over time, my wealth was not affected by it. It's really hard to necessarily say, oh, this is the exact point where it happened. But I do think that there is a correlation between giving more and living deeper in faith.
Yeah. And so what do you think your belief is around wealth? Does God want us to be more wealthy? What does he want us to do with the money that we create?
I look at examples in the Bible of wealthy individuals. I mean, Solomon was probably the wealthiest king there ever was in the history of the Bible. And when you're granted that much in resources, it is the responsibility of you to do good with those resources. And obviously he did rebuild the temple and, give out a lot of resources at the time. So for me, I try to walk that fine line between making sure that I manage my wealth responsibly, but also not letting the pursuit of money become greater than the pursuit of God, because that's exactly what God does not want. So, my husband and I still keep a we don't let our lifestyle inflate with how much more wealth we have. The only times that our spending significantly jumped was to provide for each additional child. So each additional child, if you look at the history of our spending, the graph jumps a little bit. I still drive very ordinary cars and live in a ordinary average looking house here in Orange County, but Orange County is expensive. And we also even designed our estate planning for our children such that they wouldn't get, and hopefully we would die much later. But let's say we were to die tomorrow, our children wouldn't get everything. Like they would get enough to get them to adulthood. And then we actually expect them to make a living for quite some time before we release the rest. Because again, it's like, we want them to develop their own sense of managing money. And there's a big clause in the estate planning saying if they're not going to be responsible about all this, then it's going to charity.
Amazing. I love that philosophy because I too, as much as growing up, not having enough money and, really designed to be rich, it was such a struggle, but it came with that reward of us, developing our character. And I'm like, I want that for my children too. I don't want them just sitting there going, oh, I'm just going to receive these money anyway.
Exactly.
And what kind of adult would they become? So it's great to hear that example as well. So, apart from the mindsets and then, the belief in God, I personally had to go through some strategies, learning to cut down my credit card bills, to pay off, the biggest, even the smallest amount of the credit card first. There were some strategies I had to do. Can you share what would someone need to do to kind of get ahead in their finances, tactical strategies?
I have a couple of chapters in my book about that. First, I actually teach people how to set a proper goal. Because yes, I love goals like I'm going to get debt free. I'm going to reach $1 million in net worth, or, I'm going to make 200,000 in income or something like that. And I say, we'll get there. But the very first goal you're going to set today is a goal that you feel is about 90% attainable. We're going to set a small goal.
And why is that important?
Because I've been coaching people who are in the process of, getting debt free. And oftentimes the first goal they set, they're like, I'm going to save, X dollars per month or whatever. And they don't reach it. And then they give up right away.
Yes.
And I don't want people to feel even more defeat when you already aren't feeling good about yourself. I want you to feel what it's like to win. So I was like, there's no shame in setting an attainable goal. I actually think that's the healthiest way to set them. For example, for me, it was healthcare. After having my second child, it became apparent that I wasn't working out enough. But I was always under the improper impression that I was supposed to be running 30 minutes every, other day. And I couldn't do it. Then I realized, I'm like, what if you just went to the gym for 15 minutes doing whatever it is you like? 15 minutes. And that actually eventually built up to now I work out anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes. But it's because I did a 15-minute goal at first and felt good. I was like, I could do that. Then I went on to reach it. So example, let's say you eventually need to save $1,000 a month to get debt free. But right now, because we haven't worked on your spending habits or anything, we'll say realistically, let's try for 200 because you think, 200 sounds doable. And then so we do that and you reach that goal, then you're like, wow, I feel great. I was able to
and it was easy to achieve. So you have the confidence.
Then you're like, maybe I can push myself a little bit more. Let's push it to 300. And then eventually you work way up to 1,000. Now, why do I say 90% and not 100%? Because if it's 100%, you've already done it.
Gotcha.
So I always want to introduce that little bit of a challenge at the beginning.
So then you set that goal and what's next?
Then, let's assume you have debt. We will look at all of your debts and order it by interest rate.
Actually, with the goal, do you think it's also important to kind of go, what does that mean for you? Because sometimes we can get caught up in that number. $1 million just sounds great, right? But you don't know what it's going to do for you.
Exactly.
I
think people have to have the larger goal in mind, which is what's the purpose of all of this? Because, for example, I've had a couple where, one spouse wants to save more than the other, and the other one's just like, but I really want to have money to go to the sporting event, or I really want to do this. I'm like, make that the goal. It's like, okay, the way that you guys are spending today, you're not going to be able to do all this and also take care of your family. We're going to build what you like into the goal. So for a lot of people, the concept of retirement, which is what I teach about the most, seems too far out there. Okay. Let's not call it retirement. I'm going to call it the life you would like to have once money is no longer a worry.
Yeah.
And when I say it that way, people are like, oh yeah, I have some goals for that. Or I want to travel the world. I'm like, great. We're going to start with that.
So you got the goal.
Yeah.
And then what's the next step? So I keep cutting into it.
Yeah. So in chapter 5, the debt-free plan, depending on the interest rate of your debt, because I always look at the interest rate. It doesn't matter what it is. House debt, medical debt, credit card debt, school debt. What sets your loans apart is how quickly they grow. So the higher the interest rate, the faster they grow. Those are the higher priorities relative to the lower interest rate. And so I do it almost 3 steps in that. Number 1, I don't care what your debts are. Everybody needs to have at least 1 month of bare bones bills saved as an emergency fund.
So this is the amount of money that if you didn't work, you've got enough to pay for your expenses for 1 month.
Yeah. Yep.
That's the first really goal.
Yeah. It breaks the paycheck to paycheck cycle. And many times people are paycheck to paycheck and then go into emergency and go into credit card debt. So this breaks the pattern. It can take some time to do. So I get it. And your loans are growing. I get it. It's scary, but I need that emergency fund first.
So your loans are still there, your credit card's there, but we're building this basket right now.
Yeah. You get to 1 month and then you take a look at all of your debts. We're going to put all of your extra money to anything with 10% or above interest rates. In many cases for my clients, you'll have to do 2 things. 1, you'll have to reduce your expenses, which you can usually do right away. And 2, I also want them to increase their income. Some people I find just could be making a lot more for their same skill set. Some people might side hustle. Some people may just move, one town over where the rent is a lot less. You do whatever you got to do to get rid of that. So we get rid of debts with 10% and above. Then we take a little bit of a breather. You increase your emergency fund to anywhere between 3 to 6 months of must-have bills, depending on the size of your family, the number of incomes we're talking about, and also whether you have a fallback plan. Like some of my single clients can move back home with their parents. So they don't need as large of an emergency fund. So now we have what's called a fully funded emergency fund because it can last through unemployment. Then we go back. We take all your extra money and we throw it at debts between 5 to 10% interest rates. And the reason why I actually don't go below that is because in a normal environment, debts with less than 5% interest rate tend to be mortgage debts here in the US. And those we usually just pay off on time. And you would use your extra dollar to be more productive by investing it. And so that's why I'm not all too concerned about debts with 5% or less.
And in your book, you mentioned about the FIRE movement. It's something I only recently heard about it as well, because I too kind of stumbled across the opportunity to retire early because I intentionally designed my business to run without me and enough salary that I could kind of live my life as if I'm semi-retired. And I too had some pushback when people said, I don't want to be retired that early, And I'm like, actually, I'm just living my life more intentionally right now. So tell me more a little bit about that FIRE movement. And I guess it has some limitation because it was talking about something living very frugally.
Yeah. The original, stalwarts of the movement include a very influential blogger, Mr. Money Mustache, who I highly respect. And they were targeting people who are very young and said, if you want to, quit this job that you hate, you're going to be very, very frugal until your net worth is 25 times your annual expenses. That's when you're basically calculated to have reached retirement. And I did that because I did hate my corporate job at the time. That being said, though, I think today I talk more about work optionality. And so being Save My Sense is actually my pride and joy. It's fun. It doesn't make me as much money as I did in my corporate. That's also because most of my time I'm actually being a mom. I take more of my time in caring for my family than I do in caring for the business. And that's totally okay. But that also means that I don't need to depend on any income that I make, which is fantastic. And I think that's what a lot more of the people who read my book are looking for, is what can you switch to if you didn't have to work the job that you hate? You know, there's a lot of people stuck in corporates where it's a stifling environment. And also in certain industries, the risk of layoffs is always hanging over your head. I was definitely in one of those industries where you could be laid off at any time. And so what if that stress wasn't on you anymore? What if you didn't have to work 60, 70 hours a week just to, you know, make everything work out? And so I've actually calculated that for many of my clients, if they just invest a little bit more now with all of the extra bonuses that they make from their very hard corporate jobs, then you could, at an earlier point in life, not so much waiting until your 60s, go to a job that you love, something more part-time. Some people want to travel or take a sabbatical for a couple of years. Some people want to move to a different country. Some people just want to take a caregiving break for their young children. They say, we'll get back into the game once the children are school age. And I said, yeah, those are all different models of FIRE that we could aspire to.
Yeah, because really it's about living life in your own way. And you don't, I guess that whole retirement at 65, it really needs to be gone, because I mean, at that age, you got no energy, you got no, like traveling when you're younger is just so much better. I guess talking about back to the kind of the Christianity world, how do you, balance I guess in your business now, you're starting a business and you're growing the business. And how do you make sure that you're kind of instilling the Christian values? And, because once you find your purpose and you're doing what you love, it's easy to kind of, sometimes get tempted to veer away from the godly mission again. Like, is there some sort of ritual or practice that you do to make sure that you're always on that balanced path?
Yeah. In fact, in 2024, I was trying to scale my business because I was under the impression, probably fed by social media, that, okay, if you reach a certain amount of revenue, you need to hire and scale the business and grow it bigger. And then I had an about face in 2025 where I was like, but why? Like, am I trying to make a ton more money from this business? Am I losing sight of what I love? And I realized there were some things that I loved doing that I was now giving to my teammates. And I was like, I actually don't want that. And actually sized my business back down. And I was like, you're just going to work on things that you enjoy doing and that you think are going to actually really help people. So instead of always thinking about, okay, what's a new product that I'm going to launch? How am I going to make money? Is my content look pretty? Am I going to grow? I was like, what if none of that was your metric? And your metric instead is, for every person that you touch, you're able to change their lives meaningfully in some way. Now, it's very hard for me to measure that because I have no idea how many lives are being changed. But I think taking my sights away from maximum revenue growth echoes my journey in my early 20s when I was all about, let's get rich, let's make a lot of money. I realized I was falling back into that same mindset of my early 20s and saying, no, Shang, don't do this. Be different and really and run your business in a different way. A lot of social media influencers are offered, for example, affiliate opportunities where you can sell other products or, make ads. And I just decided, unless it's literally a product or service I already use, I'm just not going to say yes to any of it.
I recently learned that as well, just asking why. Because sometimes you get caught up with the new goal because someone else said it. And it's like, why not grow your business 10x it? And you sometimes it's hard to distinguish between your ego and what you truly are capable of. What's your purpose now that back in the days, your purpose was a bit different, trying to just get rich so that you could be successful. Like, what would you say a definition of your purpose now? Yeah,
I would say my number one job is to bring up my children. So that comes first, making sure that all my children are cared for properly and get to school and all of that. And then whatever free time I have remaining, I can use it for Save My Sense to hopefully meaningfully impact people's thoughts around money. But that's sort of, and I think once I kind of flipped that script and said, mom comes first, then momtrepreneur next, it made me feel a lot better.
Yeah. Oh, that's really similar to my philosophy finally too, is that I believe in 360-degree success, meaning you need time for your health, your family, your friends, and you can still strive for a bigger business, but until all that is taken care of and you have time to grow your business, then that's great. But business doesn't come first, because sometimes as an entrepreneur, we get caught up with, I need to make more money because then I need to feed all these people.
Yeah.
But then you get caught up in more.
Yeah.
And then all of the other important priorities always have to wait.
I sometimes meet, people who were children of entrepreneurs. And it's very telling whether their parents made the business the priority or not, because you'll often find that the children wishing they saw mom or dad more often, or just feeling like there isn't that much of a connection. Now, I don't blame first generation entrepreneurs, like somebody like yourself, where like you literally had to get out of survival mode to provide for your children. Yes, there is a lot of evidence in the Bible that says it is also the parents' responsibility to be financially like stable for the family. So I don't count that. I'm talking more to the people where like you're already financially stable, or you're going to be okay, and then more money is just buying you more wealth, but at the cost of less time for your family and faith. Then that's the trade-off where I challenge and I'm saying, is that really worth it?
Yes. Yes, totally. So as we wrap up, I like to ask you, what does freedom mean to you, and how does faith play into that?
Yeah. I actually like the concept, and I don't know who taught it to me, but it was like God actually sets rules and boundaries for our freedom, because he loves us so much that he wants us to live out a free life, but that free life comes with the boundaries that are the commandments and other behaviors that he recommends in his word. And I actually see that the same way with my children. If I don't enforce any rules in my household, my children will actually end up worse off than if I did enforce some house rules. And so for me, freedom is actually the pursuit of a life that God would like me to live. And I think that actually opens me up to a life that is meaningful, joyful, stepping in purpose in my faith with God, because that ultimately that is the path that I am to travel, which is to be in alignment with God. And so for me, it is asking myself every day, is this a day that God would have, liked to have lived? Was this the right choice? And constantly working on myself on that.
And how does faith play in this role of achieving freedom?
It's everything. I would argue many times my faith is not enough. So one of my top prayers throughout my life has always been, I need more faith.
And I think it's always through challenges, through struggles is when we just lean on our faith, right?
Exactly. Like even today, driving here, I'm like, God, I have no idea what's going on with the tariffs and everything. Please give me more faith.
You just have to take one day at a time. So if we're talking to the audience right now and some of them are thinking, hey, I love the idea of discovering my true freedom and living my true life, but I'm scared, that this job is paying the bill and everything feels safe, and if I make a change, it's scary. What would you say to them?
We don't know as much as God does. And it's really, it's actually more scary to try to pretend to know that we know the future. So I actually say do it scared. Because that's actually faith, is that you're going to feel scared. You're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel like, oh, everything is not falling in place. But by walking by faith and saying, I trust that God knows a lot more than I do, that takes the pressure off of things.
Yes.
That, okay, if something doesn't quite work out, maybe it was part of God's plan. You can always blame God for it. So.
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for your time today, Shang. I've just learnt so much, and I felt so connected because it reminded me of my journey, and I'm glad that we're both here now sharing this message to people, because if we could change, so can you. And once we can change our mindset, we can change our destiny. So thank you
for your time.